Odell on the field, yes, he makes everyone better. But when you're in a situation like the Giants are where you spend $200 million on the defensive side of the ball, and now you're going to be in a situation where you're going to have to address Landon Collins' contract. Like, you're going to have to spend money in other places. Eli Manning's going to be gone. When you start giving a player $19 million a year in that long-term financial security, is that you hope that player can be now all of a sudden, when the leader of your offense is gone and Eli Manning, can step up and be that guy. And I think those are probably the questions that they're going to ask themselves, because, I mean, one of the reasons why you feel good about paying Snacks Harrison all that money is for what he's done in that locker room, right? Like, that's essentially why those guys get all that money.
Right.
Yes.
And I think the reason that Antonio Brown got the money that he got after doing what he did last year was because he had a handshake agreement with the GM and ownership. And it was one of the first things he talked about. And he's got strong leadership in that locker room with Big Ben and the coaching staff who's been there forever. But I don't know. I just think you missed an opportunity if you're Odell Beckham Jr. to answer a lot of questions. By just
Check
taking care of
boxes, like you said.
But just take care of your business. Like, they asked you to don't be a distraction. All you had to do was show up on Tuesday. If you're going to be there Thursday, just show up on Tuesday.
Now, is it a distraction to not be there, or is it because of who he is and he's not there? That's what makes the distraction.
It's the distraction because he's the only guy that's not there. And when you start talking about your best player on your team is not there when everybody else is there, I mean, it sends the wrong message, especially when the organization is talking about how he needs to mature, especially when Ben McAdoo said this offseason how his guys need to do a better job of saying no to things outside of the building that don't align with the team's goals of ultimately winning a championship. By having everybody there on the first day of OTAs, it sends the message to the rest of the world, to the organization, and more importantly to the guys in the locker room that we're locked in on trying to compete for a championship. And what does Odell do? He tells them that what he's got to do is more important than what the team is trying to do right now. And that's why I wonder, is it going to affect his relationship, the things that he's doing outside of football with the guys in the locker room? That's the big question that I have. And, of course, the organization is looking for reasons to justify having to allocate maybe $18.5 million per year to this guy, because ultimately when you pay that much money to one player, it's going to cost you in another area. You mentioned the Landon Collins extension. They also got to deal with Justin Pugh. They also got to deal with Weston Richburg. I mean, who's that going to cost you? It already cost you Jonathan Hankins this offseason.
Wow.
Who's it going to cost you next?
That's a fair point, too. It's like, so one of these guys is not going to be here because we got to pay that guy.
Yes.
And Mo, by the way, that guy's not here right now.
You know what it is, too, though? I think it has to do with the timing of things, too, right? Is the fact that at some point here over the next couple of years, you're going to end up losing Eli Manning. And he's been the face of your franchise. And I think a lot of people in that locker room have enough respect for Eli Manning, even though he's not a vocal leader. He is the leader of that offensive side of the ball. Now, you got Snacks Harrison, you got Landon Collins, you got OV, you got leaders on the defensive side of the ball, but at some point, you're going to need a guy to step up and be the leader of the offense. And when you're as good as Odell Beckham Jr. is, I mean, you can clearly tell that he's next in line to be the leader of that offense.
He might not be wired that way, though. Like, he might be the talent, but he's not a leader.
No, I get it.
But I mean, there's guys like that.
Here's another hockey parallel.
Okay.
But here's another hockey parallel. Like, the reason you feel good about giving Patrick Kane $10 million a year.
Because you have Taves.
Because you give Taves $10 million a year, and those guys are tethered together.
Right.
So you got the foundational guy, the consistent guy, and we can pay Patrick Kane, who's the better offensive player, because we feel good about the leadership.
Because Patrick Kane can go ahead and do what he does, and we don't need to ask any more from him because we have Taves who will handle all the other stuff.
Exactly right.
And that's something they got to find, I guess, with the Giants on the offensive side of the ball, is find somebody else that can be the Taves to let Odell be the Kane.
Exactly. Just do whatever he does. Like, you don't want to rely on Odell being the guy that's going to show up and be the same guy every single day, because that's not who he is. He's temperamental. Like, you need to let him do exactly what he needs to do to make sure he's successful.
Like Milbury said about one of your teammates.
Yeah.
What makes him a blank is what makes him good. Sometimes you just got to live with it.
But if you're the Giants organization, right, and you realize that you have a window to win a championship over the next years with Eli Manning, you know the impact that he can have toward doing that. But once Eli Manning leaves, I mean, he's the face of your franchise. I mean, he might already be the face of your franchise looking at this Nike deal that he just signed. So, I mean, if you're going through a process where you're going to have to rebuilding your roster, what are you going to sell?
Odell.
You're going to sell number 13.
You're selling number 13.